Hi guys, hold on for to the video. I have something very important to tell you. Professor Jon V. Kofas has published his new book in collaboration with Little French Media, and the title of the book is Neoliberalism, Inequality, and Authoritarianism. This book details how neoliberalism impacts the geopolitical economy in the 21st century. You can buy it from Amazon, and the link is in the description. Thank you. Now let's proceed to the video.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a session which deals with materialism and society. It is a summary of a much longer session which I had done some time ago. And I want to give people an overview of what exactly is at stake here. First of all, materialism as a philosophical concept has been around for more than 2,500 years, um, written about in ancient Greece as well as in ancient India. Roughly around the same time, India first, Greece following, Greek philosophers following. And basically, the assertion was that materialism is the essence of life in the universe. This is in sharp contrast with obviously spiritualism, which has been a far stronger cultural and institutional force throughout human history, and it remains so to this day. The focus of my session is not necessarily to discuss the philosophy of materialism, but rather to point out, as those of you, and I invite all of you to see the video on materialism. And as you will see, the focus is how the neoliberal model of the current um, political economy, in which much of the world within various varying degrees, depending from one country to another, apply the neoliberal model in policy, how the neoliberal model has molded human behavior, um, and how humanity has benefited or been harmed by the pursuit of materialism and the celebration of materialism, because this is not merely an issue of pursuing materialism under neoliberalism. This is really bringing materialism to a much higher level where it is celebrated, it is um, held up as the ultimate goal of a human being. Obviously, there have been studies by psychologists which uh, indicate that the model has not necessarily served well a great many people. This obviously includes the lower classes, the working classes, which are, of course, the vast majority of the planet's population. But even those pursuing materialism in the middle class and even in the upper, the very wealthy in the upper class, um, even they, uh, according to studies that have been done by psychologists, are not necessarily satisfied, happy, if you will, um, with the pursuit of materialism, because it's an endless black hole that can never be satisfied because there is no end to material pursuits. Materialism has always been class based. whether it is in ancient societies, in ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, um, in medieval Europe. It has always been class based. The vast majority of the what we would call, let's general category, working people, whether it was slaves and peasants in the classical world, in Egypt, in Rome, in Greece, serfs and peasants and small farmers in the Middle Ages, 1,000 years, which, by the way, in the medieval West, that is called the Age of Faith, not the age of materialism, but the age of faith. The fact is that those people were outside of this domain. They were directed, in fact, by the elites, religious and non religious elites, both, to focus on spiritual pursuits, especially in the medieval period, in the medieval West, especially in the medieval West, but also in India, in the Indian subcontinent, in under Islam, under Judaism, during the period of the Byzantium, while the elites, religious, whether they were in the field of religion, that is in the priesthood or not, while they lived, in fact, a life of materialism, especially in the medieval West, um, they guided the masses to be satisfied with having the very few material possessions, a life essentially of privation, a life of misery, because there was very there was no affluence. And we look at statistics, for example, life expectancy and so forth, and we see that people did not live very long. There was no, and that is also class based. It was then and still is today. The poorer the people, the worse the conditions. So materialism has been class based always. It has always been class based, and it remains class based. It is rather arrogant to ask people today, in, let's say, who are in the global south, whether it's in the global south or in the United States, Canada, it doesn't matter where, who are um, poor or on the edge of poverty or barely making it. It is rather arrogant to ask them not to be materialistic, considering they're not in any case, and they were forced into their current social status precisely because of the mode of production, of the political economy, of the institutional constraints placed on them. They were not born the way they were. They were the social contract. Let me put it even broader, more broadly. The social contract put them in that social framework. Materialism is celebrated, has been celebrated, especially under capitalism, as a virtue and a sign that an individual is successful. If you're, if you are, in fact, if you have material possessions, that's a mark of success. And this has to do with the value system, and that's very important. This is one of the things that I address in the longer video, and that is the culture of materialism goes to the heart of a culture, the heart of civilization. What does civilization value? Does it value material possessions for its own sake? And as I stated already, and I talk about it at length in the video, in the longer video, um, is the endless pursuit of material possessions. an end in itself? And is this what gives meaning to human life? Is this the goal of humanity? Um, and the question is whether the hegemonic culture, the dominant culture in society um, today, but historically, but especially today under neoliberalism, which celebrates materialism as a virtue, whether the goal of society is endless accumulation at the expense, for very few, by the way, at the expense for the vast majority. In other words, the issue here is distribution of material wealth. And the distribution of material wealth is at the core of this issue because the distribution is uneven socioeconomically, that is among social classes, but also geographically on a world scale. When you look at IMF, World Bank, and United Nations statistics, what you find is that there is gross maldistribution, that is very bad distribution of resources on a world scale, with the G7 plus China having much of the material wealth on the planet. And you have also a very small percentage of very wealthy people, billionaires and millionaires, whether in China, by the way, or Russia, the oligarchs of Russia, or American capitalists from Wall Street. It doesn't matter where they are. This is on a world scale, okay, at the expense of the vast majority of the population on the edge of starvation or near that. Let me point out, by the way, that the United Nations does have, has had, in fact, for the last 3 decades, a Millennium Goal program of eliminating poverty on a world scale. The only country so far that has managed to end extreme poverty is China because of its vastly rapid growth under extraordinarily fast industrial development and an export growth economy. And China does have, it's not just that, it's also that China does have a social development goal component to that runs parallel to economic development. So materialism in China um, is part of public planning. That is, the government plans on redistributing material wealth through public policy. All governments do. It doesn't matter what they say, by the way. They claim, well, we believe there's no laissez-faire. The fiscal policy, the tax system, the way they allocate resources, one way is through the fiscal system. That is, deciding to tax heavily the bottom two-thirds lightly as you go up in the wealth category. The richer, the lower the tax burden. That fiscal structure reflects how government favors, through public policy, redistributing material wealth upwards toward the upper classes. So we have had, under neoliberalism in the last 45 years, mass redistribution of wealth from social welfare to corporate welfare, that is enriching the richest, making them more wealthy. So material and the contradiction here under neoliberalism is that they preach that neoliberalism, they preach um, the virtue of materialism and the values of materialism, when in fact materialism is really the domain of the wealthy and the upper middle class, with the vast majority of the lower echelons in the social ladder, not having that kind of privilege, which is created through public policy. This is the contradiction. They claim that this is the private sector, the private sector. Private sector can do nothing without the state. The state conducts policy which favors the private sector, and the private sector's policies result in the greater material concentration enjoyed by the privileged classes to the detriment of the lower classes. I'm going to end it there. I invite all of you to please look at the longer video to, in fact, send comments, questions. I read them. I also want to invite you to please enroll in this channel. This is a channel which is managed by my good friend Asad Alim. He is an educational channel. Um, he does an excellent job in trying to provide credible information and tutorials and interviews and various educational programs to benefit the audience. Thank you very much for joining me, and we'll continue with another session very soon. Thank you.